Okay, I'm just going to talk for a little while because we left off because we had so much information about Shetland sheep. Well, first of all, does anybody have any questions or want to say anything about the sheep of the sheep of the week and the wool? Just anybody have any questions or comments?
I don't know. It's lovely stuff.
I've been getting a lot of people in emails saying like how much they're enjoying it and how much they're, how nice it is to move from one wool to the other, and it's so surprising, and I'm glad everybody's enjoying it.
I did want to ask something. For some reason, I can't get my video on, but
That's okay.
hopefully you can hear me. You said that we've used 3 yarns. Have we really used 4 yarns? Like
Yeah,
I've used some of the white. Is that right?
Yeah, I didn't say we used 3. We've covered 3 in the discussion. So
Gotcha.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. At the end of clue 3, no, at the end of clue 2, you will have used 4 different yarns. But the one that the one that we're discussing now is D, which is the one that you worked the band of lace pattern in.
Okay.
In the top part, yeah. And then you did get clue number 3 though, right?
Oh yes, I got it done.
Yep. Okay. So then you will have used, oh, you won't have used the 4th yarn yet. That'll be next. No, you will have used the 4th yarn. Yeah. You use C and then B again in clue number 3.
Okay, right? So but have we used all of them now?
No. Oh yes, yes.
Okay, good.
If you completed clue number 3, then you've used all of them.
Okay. Yep. And it's beautiful.
And the one we're working with now is the Shetland. Let me just I'm in the shop, so I have some at hand here. Is the Shetlandia in the Emskek color. It's kind of a brownish gray color. It's very squishy.
They all feel so good in your hand when you're knitting.
They really do. Yeah.
You don't have some Shetland, sometimes you'll feel really rough and dry. I'm not feeling that with these. I'm enjoying it so much.
Yeah. The quality of this is really nice. And it is the British Shetland, so it is, if you remember from the talk, it is more likely to be like an improved Shetland, the single coated Shetland that's probably in the genetics has some crosses in it that may have improved the wool a little bit, but also the mill that spins this yarn is spinning it in the semi-worsted preparation. So a lot of the Shetland wool from Great Britain and Shetland, a lot of the yarns are spun in woolen mills. So you get that woolen prep, which does give the final yarn a little bit more of a rougher feel because the fiber is not smoothed as much in the process, and the consistency varies a little more. The fiber arrangement within the yarn is a little more chaotic, and that gives it a little more air, but it also can make it feel a little rougher. So Shetland sheep are known for a very soft and well crimped fleece. So it's going to be very springy and soft and very fine. If you remember, the fiber averages at about 23 microns, which is similar to merino. It falls within that, same fineness level as a merino yarn. And some of the lamb's wool can be as fine as 13 microns, which is very fine, which is like having silk or cashmere or really fine alpaca. Each sheep produces only between 2 and 4 pounds of wool. So even though it is often a longer fleece and the sheep are very fluffy, like when you look at their pictures, they look like round little cartoon sheep. They have very fluffy, but these sheep are really small, like the size of a dog. You know, they're not, and some of them are really small. There are these little miniature Shetland sheep that you can actually keep as house pets if you want to. So they just don't have, there's just not a lot of surface area to produce a large fleece. And that fleece size has remained constant for a couple of centuries throughout Great Britain, which contributes to the rarity of the fiber. So it is, as we talked about before, in Shetland, this is a product that has been elevated to a specialty product. It has achieved a designation that makes it like a geographic specialty, and it's protected by the fact that it's rare and that it has to be, if it's called pure Shetland wool, it has to be actually raised on Shetland. So all of those things contribute to kind of a rarity, or at least a preciousness of this fiber. That said, in the British Shetland sheep and the American Shetland sheep, fleece sizes of 5 or 6 pounds are not uncommon. And even on Shetland, you can improve your flock with better food and like more protected, you know, putting jackets on the fleece, etc., to increase the usable amount of the fleece. So typically the Shetland sheep that are raised on the Shetland Islands produce a staple length or a fiber length of 2 to 4.5 inches. But again, longer fleeces are recorded. It's not uncommon for a Shetland fleece to be 6 or 7 inches long. When it grows to that length, it's usually most usable by hand spinners rather than getting it commercially spun. So most people, if they're sending their fleece to a commercial mill, even a small one, it needs to be less than 6 inches to be usable at the mill. So the actual wool fiber is similar in construction to a lot of other fibers. It has a central cortex covered by a thin, scaly cuticles that have, and the fiber has an average diameter of 23 microns. Let's see, the amount of crimp varies, and that's important in establishing the amount of kind of bounciness of the wool. So there's a positive correlation between the amount of crimp and the fineness. So wool of the very finest quality has more crimp per inch. So more of that zigzaggy shape per inch. Now, remembering back to the talk the other day, we know that the Shetland sheep came from very primitive genetic lines of other northern short-tail sheep, like the Icelandic sheep, etc. And it's not really clear when the fleece of the Shetland sheep distinguished itself as a soft luster type sheep, which is what it's known for now. Like, it really is much finer than the Icelandic and even the Gotland wool that come from related genetics. But by the year 1797, the fineness of the breed was established and recorded in, texts that describe the wool as being so. And the early explanation for how that happened was basically a system, an informal system of breeding by just choosing the best sheep. So I think I related this the other day, but it's just a little story that was recorded in the late 1700s, that sheep were usually kept by the children of the family, especially these small sheep could be cared for and looked over by the boys and girls of the family. And each boy and girl would be sort of competing to have the best sheep or the best looking sheep. And that included the softness of its fiber. And so by this kind of selective breeding, they would, the best sheep would be elevated within the family farm and kept and bred. And the ones with, not as nice fleeces or not as voluminous fleeces would be kind of relegated to the table, basically. So as with the Gotland sheep that we studied in Barn Box recently, it was more, it's widely accepted that an informal selective breeding process contributed to the evolution of the fleece from a kind of rougher class of wool to a finer, more lustrous one. The fleece of the short tail breeds in general is double coated. I think we went over this last week, and that includes like the Icelandic sheep. I'm trying to think of some others. It always escapes me when I get talking about it, but Icelandics are a good example of this. They have a outer hair coat that's straighter and coarser and isn't as nice for spinning into next to the skin garments. And that acts as kind of a covering or an umbrella for an undercoat that is very, very fine and soft and airy, and acts as more of an insulation for the body. So in keeping with those genetics, the more primitive Shetlands do still show that double coat, and but improved branches of that breed have developed, have been bred to produce a single coat that is all over, more a little, not quite as fine as the undercoat, not quite as coarse as the hair coat, but produces kind of a medium fleece that is fluffy and soft and usable in a variety of ways. And the British Shetland is considered that type. And most of the Shetlands raised in the US are that single coated type as well. In fact, we have this producer here in Ohio that we went to visit a few years ago. She has a really nice flock of sheep that produces beautiful Shetland fleeces. And she was shocked to learn that Shetlands had double coats. She didn't even know that about them. She had only ever been exposed to the single coated variety. And when I told her that, when we had, talked on the phone before our visit and exchanged emails several times, I think we saw each other at a couple of shows. She was really, when I said that to her when I asked her about whether her sheep were double coated or single coated, she was like, what are you, some kind of city person that doesn't know the difference? Like, she doubted it. She didn't say that to me. She just said, later she said, I had to go home and look that up because I had never heard of a double coated Shetland sheep. And she was like, I learned something new by, having that discussion. So I thought that was really funny. But at the same time, her sheep produce that type of fleece that can be rude, or, she has a couple of sheep that when the time is right in the spring, instead of shearing, she can just pull their fleece right off their body. It just comes off like a rug, it's called ruing to pull it that way. And she has a couple sheep that she can do that with. So that's kind of interesting because that indicates genetics that go back to a more primitive type Shetland sheep. Let's see. Now, in terms of the double coated Shetlands, the distinction between the outer coat and the inner coat of the Shetland sheep is probably less pronounced in this breed than it is in this breed and the Finn sheep as well, than some of the other short tail breeds, like some of the Swedish breeds and the Icelandic breed. It's a very distinct difference. You can tell right away which is the outer coat and which is the inner coat. And for those who haven't had the chance to see the double coat of sheep wool, you might be familiar though with how alpaca can be double coated and how alpaca can have a lot of the hair fiber mixed into it in with the very soft fine fiber, and the hair fiber in alpaca is one of the reasons that a lot of people find alpaca itchy or unpleasant to wear, because the straight hair fiber that gets mixed in with the alpaca fleece can be kind of pokey and kind of unpleasant against like your neck skin, for instance. Shetland fiber varies greatly, ranging from an incredibly fine 13 to 15 micron fiber to around the neck to the coarser wool around the rear end area that can be as much as 36 microns, which is squarely in the kind of medium classification of wool. And landrace populations of Shetlands, i.e. native populations of Shetlands, for instance, those on the island of Fala, include an even greater range of fleece types. Those sheep can be more distinctly double coated with a coarse outer wool of 30 to 40 microns and a fine inner coat of 12 to 20 microns. So that diversity is kind of an asset for smaller producers because it allows for a wider range of products to be developed from, a single small flock of sheep. Okay, we did talk the other day about the different kind of the 3 different types of fleece coats, and let me just see, and the ones that have the outer coat, the double coat, tend to be the ones that live on the kind of more difficult places to reach and difficult climates to exist in. So the double coat serves a purpose for them in terms of weather. The outer coat protects against the weather and the inner coat provides insulation next to the skin. So as an unimproved breed, the Shetland was never intended to have a completely uniform fleece from head to tail. So typically, again, within a small flock, within a household flock, or a group of small flocks that exist in a town, the Shetland fleece could be put to multiple uses, and the very fine wool could be used for things like the finest lace shawls, moving backwards on the animal. The next kind of class up of fleece could be made into underwear and lightweight summer woolens, and then the heavier sections for socks and outerwear and saddles and all kinds of household type woolens, blankets and upholsteries and things like that. In order to bring the Shetland breed and the usability of the breed into the modern era, there has been kind of an effort to make it an overall more commercially viable breed. And so some of the producers and larger producers kind of strive to have more uniformity within a single animal so that the animal can be simply sheared and the wool goes off, you know, to the mill to be made into yarn for weaving and roving for spinning and things like that. And in that way, they're producing fleeces that are more easily handled by commercial processors. Again, Shetland wool produced on the Shetland Islands has a classification as native Shetland wool. and is protected as a product by that designation. Kind of like Chianti wine can only be produced in a small region in Italy. It's the same thing with the native Shetland wool. And among Shetland producers, that would be the most rare type and the most valuable type. That doesn't mean that it's the type that any individual knitter is going to find the most desirable. It's just that it's a geographic designation only. Getting back to the primitive kind of double coated type, the wool, when it is produced that way by the animal, it's shed each year. So that undercoat loosens, and during a process, usually in the spring when the weather warms up, it's called a process called the rise. And the rise is when the undercoat starts to work itself out. And that's caused by the change in seasons. During the winter, the growth of the wool slows considerably. And it causes kind of a weak spot in the staple length, in the locks. And in the spring, when the rapid growth rate resumes, the old wool breaks off at that weak spot. That's kind of like a, little perforation in the wool. You can think of it that way. And that at that time, if the type of coat is right, the wool can be pulled off, like I was describing earlier, or rude from the sheep, eliminating the need for shearing and resulting in the softest available harvest. So by doing it that way, without cutting the fiber, the fleece is completely devoid of prickly, sharp ends, and each end of the fiber kind of has a similar construction, a similar shape. So the tips have their little point to them, and the end that's pulled off or broken off is also kind of very soft. It's the difference between cutting your yarn and tearing it is the same thing. The timing of the rise can be different in each sheep, so it's really difficult to manage with a large flock. Although the fact that it's different in every sheep gives you a little bit of opportunity to do the ruing is a little bit slower. It gives you a little, if you have a small flock, it gives you a chance to kind of pay attention to each animal and work with each animal separately. But because it is a difficult process to manage in a large flock, most of the larger flocks are sheared mechanically. So the harvesting fleece by ruing is a good way to add a little bit of value to your flock if you are a small holder and only have a limited number of wool, a limited amount of wool to sell each season. The rude wool is more valuable on the market and will command higher prices. Let's see. Shetland wool is traditionally used in the making of knitwear, for which the Shetland Islands have become famous, especially since the early 1900s when the Prince of Wales began sporting, you know, these Fair Isle vests and sweaters. It kind of really brought the world attention to the kind of knitting that they do there. The fiber, the finest fiber is, as I said, next to the skin soft, and the color ranges, remember, there are 11 colors and 30 different marking patterns. So the range of shades that are able to be produced is wonderfully wide. And if you add the dyeing of the wool to that, on top of the different shades, you really have an unlimited number of colors that could be produced with this wool. The fineness of the fiber, the range of fineness allows for yarns to be spun that are as thin as what they call the cobweb lace. So for knitting the very finest lace garments, all the way up to, I know that Shetland wool is spun in a variety of weights, but to be honest, I think most people know it in the fingering and sport weight versions because of the fact that it's a great yarn to use for color work. Because this fiber blooms and has this kind of ability to hook itself together in terms of, you know, the stitches once it blooms, it produces wonderfully cohesive color work and smooth surface in working those kind of Fair Isle patterns. So it's very desirable for that kind of work. And that really is a function of the way it blooms, the way the cuticle itself blossoms and blooms and attaches itself one fiber to another. Let's see. Within the yarn itself, the fibers of the outer and inner coats are most of the time mixed. So, but even with the coarse hair mixed in, the finished yarn is usually fairly soft to handle. Coarser portions of the fleece, as I said before, can be separated out to be used for you know, more sturdy items in the event that a producer wants to save that fine undercoat and separate it to specifically make cobweb lace yarns and very fine yarns for, you know, a market that will pay higher prices for that. Records show that even in the early 17th century, hand-knitted garments from Shetland were being traded to the Dutch and English. For over 100 years, the Shetland wool industry maintained a reputation for superior quality wool and lace work. And by the early 1900s, markets for lace work were disappearing, but hand-knitted garments were increasing in popularity. Knitters throughout Shetland adapted again to produce the richly patterned Fair Isle sweaters, hats, and mittens. And the industry itself, was soon threatened by a reduction in the wool quality caused by crossbreeding. And that's why, you know, going back to the talk the other day, the formation of the Shetland Flock Book Society kind of put a damper on that decline in the wool quality by insisting that if you want your wool to be squarely classed as genuine Shetland wool and kind of genuine Shetland wool that conforms to breed standards set by the society, then you will not be introducing crossbreeding practices that decrease the quality of the wool. So the establishment of the Flock Book Society did have a positive effect on the production of the wool, and probably saved the breed from becoming just another British breed. Shetland fleece can be hand spun straight from shorn locks or carded and into rollags and then woolen spun or combed and worsted spun. It felts well using either dry or wet methods. And when processed commercially, the wool can be made into the finest lightweight worsted cloth or heavier weight hard wearing fabrics and tweeds. In addition to the softness, again, the Shetland wool offers a range of 11 natural colors from pure white to true black, as well as a range of grays and browns. And everything in between, really. They produce cool grays and warm grays, and the black really is a true black. In fact, our first Shetland yarn that we shipped in a club back in 2016, I think it was, or 2017, we actually got that Shetland from a different, we didn't have that custom spun for us. We bought it from a woman in California who she has sold her business since, but Elemental Affects was a company that she actually kept Shetland sheep and produced yarns from her flock. She had a large flock, and she had she produced a wide range of colors. So we purchased, I think, 4 or 5 different shades of Shetland yarn to do a half shawl back in those club days. And one of the colors we got was her black. And it really is a black. And we still have a bit of that yarn listed on our website. If you're interested in seeing even more shades of Shetland wool, look for the Elemental Affects yarn on our website, and you'll get to see what that's like. It isn't as soft as the Shetland that we produce under our own label, but it is interesting because of the color range. It is more of the cooler grays and the very white and like I said, the black. Let's see. Fowler wool is kind of an interesting subcategory of Shetland. We talked a little bit about the island of Fowler. It is the most isolated inhabited island in Great Britain. In times past, this island was a stronghold called Ulitma Thule, the edge of the world. Serving as a training ground for would-be Viking princes, Fowler is the last known refuge of the Old Norse language Norn. Situated about 20 miles west of the Shetland Islands, Fowler has maintained an indigenous population of native Shetland sheep in near isolation for as long as anyone can recall. The Fowler sheep is a hardy animal which retains all of its primitive survival instincts. It is naturally suited to the extreme conditions in this wild and rugged island. This distinctive flock has a unique visual identity, commonly referred to as the Fowler Shetland sheep or simply Fowler sheep. Their naturally colored fleeces are hand sheared and milled on the island into a high quality Shetland knitting yarn with a strong softness and pronounced texture. I'm gonna just once again bring up the picture of the Fowler sheep just to remind you. They are a wilder looking, let's see. These are the, well, these are the ones that are coded. They don't. It's kind of ironic that the one picture, one of the pictures I have of these, oh darn it, it's not loading. It looks like my photos aren't going to load again tonight. I wish I had more control over that, but anyway, they are a more kind of, it's hard to explain the, you know, what the distinction is between how rugged they look, but they do look, they just look like more, I don't know, they have a crazier kind of longer fleece, and they just look like a more primitive type animal. By the way, this whole discussion of Shetland sheep makes up a whole chapter in one of the ebooks that we have. It's the let me look it up. I think it's the 2016 B&K. Just, yeah, it's B&K 2017. If anyone has that or desires to, you know, kind of have this material more at hand, this is a chapter that has all the photos that I referred to during the talk, as well as the tables with all the color names and the markings and all of the information that I've been presenting for the last 2 sessions is in that chapter.
Could you say that again, Anne? I'm sorry. What
Say what?
ebook it is?
It's B&K 2017,
Thank you.
and it's the chapter called, this one is from the, sorry, I closed this. Primitive Tradition is the name of the chapter. All right. I'm done talking now. I'm sorry it went on so long.
That's all right. It's interesting.
Yeah.
How do you find that book? Is it called, there's only 2017 Mood Swings? That's color.
Right.
Oh,
It's,
that's the one?
yeah, they're all listed here in terms of their years. So it's the B&K 2017.
Okay.
Yeah, the one, it looks like it has a shawl
Yeah. Yeah.
as the photo.
Can you just buy those?
Yes. Yeah, they're all for sale on our website. And each one has a number of chapters that go into like the wool discussion and also a group of patterns. So this one has 1, 2, 3. This one includes 9 patterns. And it has 6. Oh, it has 4 chapters. So the other chapters were, we did a gradient wool based on our Better Breakfast yarn that year. We did the Shetland yarn. We did Surrey alpaca, as well as that was when we introduced our deco yarn that year. So those are the chapters in there, and all of the ebooks are really kind of cool. They have a lot of good information, especially the B&K ones. That's definitely, if you're very interested in the kinds of talks that I've been doing for the Wool Along, all of the old B&K books are really, you know, worth reading. Because we did some really interesting fibers along the way. We did camel, we did native silk, we did cashmere, and you know, I tried to make every chapter like we were actually traveling to the places where those fibers were produced. So they represent quite a bit of effort and research and fun involved. And then there are, you know, numerous patterns included as well. So
I have a kind of a change of topic question. Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Oh, absolutely. We're done talking and we're ready to have fun now.
Okay. My question, I'm struggling with this project only because I struggle with lace. So, but I'm getting better at it, so that's good. And I do really love color work, and I was envisioning a sort of a Nordic color work sweater with your yarn, and went online looking for other people who have done that and didn't find much. And I'm wondering, is there just not quite enough? I found like two colors, like a cream and a, you know, a gray or something, but is there just not quite enough contrast in colors to do and get an effective design using only the undyed yarn?
No, that's not the case at all. I mean, really, it's more a matter of, you know, we haven't been able to get a lot of color work designers interested in working with it, unfortunately.
Mhm.
So I've actually done quite a bit of color work with our yarns, and they're absolutely, it's absolutely doable to work with the different shades and get plenty of contrast, even in colors that sit right next to each other in a gradient range. For instance, like if you look at our stone soup yarns, it seems like they wouldn't, it seems like when a color is next to each other that the contrast isn't high enough, but then when you actually knit it, you can see that it is.
Okay.
And I'm sorry I don't have enough. I don't keep a list in my head of people who've worked with our yarns, but I know I have swatched quite a bit for my color work project of my dreams to do. And still, and I'm always really happy with the different gradations that you can get. And in fact, I mean, I always prefer closer color combinations than high contrast ones, but you can definitely get you can definitely get some really beautiful subtle shading with just a few colors, really.
Thank you.
Are
Yeah,
you
the
thinking?
one of your patterns I thought was a dog pattern. There was a
Yeah,
dog pattern that had color work.
yeah,
So
I did
that
a
was-
bunch of I did some color work. Yeah, let me find those pictures. Let me see if I can find those. I don't know if I'll be able to share it. But
Julie in Iowa did a really beautiful uh Mary Mucklestone cardigan using the Kent worsted or DK.
probably
And
the
that, yeah, it was really cool. I don't know if you remember, it was the one with the mussel shell body, and then she had she used the white sand and one of the grays in the yoke. It looks so good. Maybe if you did a search on Ravelry with the yarns too, you'd come across more, but
Yeah,
like-
that's what I did. Mhm.
yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
designer on Ravelry called the Petite Knitter, and
Yeah.
she uses Icelandic yarns, but she uses undyed yarns, and she does a lot of yoked sweater patterns that she uses undyed yarns, and Anne's yarns are the perfect colors for her
yeah,
patterns.
yeah, and she requested yarn for designs that will be coming out next year, and we sent her a big box of yarn actually. So she's working with it now. And I want to say,
Jessica did the blizzard. Wasn't it?
yeah, well, and that's what I'm sorry, that's what Cheryl was saying. Like, she did find where someone would use like a white on a dark or a dark on a white, like a 2-color design, but to actually go into something more complicated. I mean, I have swatched a few different times with different shades of the Shetlandia. sport because we have 6 shades and they do represent kind of a gradient from white all the way to morit. And we have the 3 solids and the 3 marled shades that kind of fall between the solids. And I'm just in love with the subtlety of those, of the combinations you can make, if that makes sense. I'm more about that.
So
And
do-
then, because the thing about color work is when you're up close to it, it may not look like there's a lot of contrast, but you step back and all of a sudden it pops like what's going on, you know?
So is there a possibility of a color work mystery wool along in your near future?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that would be really fun.
I think it would be great
As you know, I've always,
to do color
yeah.
work. I'm not very brave on my own, but that would really draw me in.
yeah, I mean, I always wonder how many people would be interested in something like that, but even if we just did the yoke during the knit along and then, because the finishing is really solid, you know?
Right.
Or I was thinking maybe I need to just buy a gradient of maybe like stone soup and make some hats and see what
Right,
happens.
Well, that would
right.
work.
So this is like 6 different shades of Kent DK. And again, like I said, I like combinations that are really close in color.
Ooh, pretty.
So, yeah. And some of them, I'm mixing the browns and the warm brown grays and the cool brown grays together. And even though that isn't like the best photo, I just snapped it. And then, let me see if I can find, even within this project. Oh, and here's, Jose, knit this or crocheted this. She's not here tonight, but this is like a whole bunch of different shades of a better breakfast. So I mean, she's used like every different shade in this project. So it's the happy potamus. It's the happy potamus pattern. And I mean, I just think, you know, even some of these flowers that have really close colors, you can definitely still see a distinction there. And what I love is that you have the opportunity to use the warm colors and the cool colors to create an even, to create more depth. Our little tiny dog is really old, so I knit for her. This isn't really, it's not so related to the Nordic style that you're talking about, but it does involve several different colors together. So you kind of get a sense of how the colors blend and contrast with each other. But what I want to find is that swatch, Sherry, that I showed you, that Shetland swatch I made long ago, probably about a year ago.
And Barbara said in the chat that she knit your apples in clover way back in 2012. And I have pulled up a photo of that.
Yeah.
Look for her project, but that is color work with some of your yarns. And it looks good. It's the apples in clover can.
Is it with the stones? Which yarn is it with?
I think it's with the
Because
stone
the
tree.
original design was in the Brooklyn Tree,
And
I
how
think
about the,
and we did have it. We have a sample in Stone Soup too. That's really nice.
how about the Amalfi
Here it
Coast
is.
skirt?
Yep, but here's the swatch I was thinking of to show Cheryl. This is just 3 shades of the Shetlandia. This is the Shetlandia fingering yarn. The original 3 shades here. And so that's the same pattern top and bottom, but with the colors one way and then the colors the other way. So hopefully the photo quality of that is enough to get an idea of how they work.
That's so cool.
I like that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I had a better picture somewhere. I'm gonna see if I can
Oh.
find it.
The Kingston cowl was pretty cool color work we did in a class with you years ago.
Yep. That
Mhm.
was the
Was
Kent,
confection
that
or
was the
confection?
confection sport. Yep.
That was beautiful color work.
Confection sport.
Icelandic-y
Yep.
looking.
And Jose knit that. Yeah, Jose knit that beautiful sweater with the shades of, it was actually over dyed confection sport, but you still got a sense of the different shades together. So it was all the different shades of confection sport over dyed with the red Festivus from that year. That was pretty cool. You can mix the wools. I reserve that for when I'm doing something like mosaic knitting, where the wool is really going to be mixed like 50-50 or very evenly. Like if you're using 3 different wools, you might have a very even distribution of each one, simply because that way, if there is a difference in the texture or the kind of weight per yard, that you would be, here it is, you would be distributing that as evenly as possible,
Okay, that makes sense.
if that makes sense.
I don't know how well it worked out, but there are several examples on Ravelry of using Icelandic wool as the main part of the sweater, but then using your yarn.
So there's that swatch again in better light, so you can
Oh, yeah.
see. Yeah, and that's just 3 colors. I can
That's
just
great.
imagine what you could do with more colors. And if you look closely, that is the same motif in the top band as the bottom band. It's just the reverse of the
Right.
order of the colors. And then in the middle is just a different little design. So anyway, I'll stop with the pictures now. But
So Anne, I was gonna say, it is no more possible, excuse me, to have too many pictures of your dogs than it is to have too much wool in your stash.
Yes.
if it was possible to like order them a little better, but I know I can make albums and stuff, and I do, but I don't use them as much as I should.
Well, speaking of Icelandic wool, my daughter is going to Iceland in the fall.
Oh, nice. I
I'm
always
trying
want
to
to
think,
there.
do I get her to bring me back wool, or do I just splurge and have her bring me back an actual sweater or something made there?
Both. Both.
Both. Yeah, that's great.
I remember
what-
when my friend Kim went and they were traveling, they did the perimeter road for like a week. And she would be texting me. She's like, "You can get yarn at the gas station here." She was so excited about that.
I went to the first sock summit and I think I took 2 suitcases. One had stuff in it and one was empty. And when I came back from sock summit, I had 3 suitcases, 2 with yarn. But of course, I'm sorry, at that time, it wasn't your yarn.
Yeah, we were
That was-
making yarn then, but I was at the sock summit though.
Well, I pretty much got around to everybody, but I was into color, real color. I have a thing
Yeah.
for, dyed things,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
most people do. It's okay.
Okay.
So we were on a flight. We used to spend January in Southern California, like Palm Springs, because of the rain here. This is pre-pandemic, obviously. So we got in our seats and right across the aisle was another couple. And I pulled out my knitting and she pulled out her knitting. So then we had to talk, right? And they had come back from a trip to Iceland and she had bought all the yarn there and she was making this sweater for her husband. And it was a traditional yoke sweater and it was so beautiful. And it was all in natural yarns. It was gorgeous.
Well, yeah, and there was a time when that was the norm to work in all natural colors, and having dyed yarns was a luxury and special. Let me just see it. Oh, here's the apples and clover. I mean, this is the one that we have in stone soup, in the stone soup colors from back in the beginning. So
Oh, nice.
yeah,
It's lovely.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd be up for one of those.
It's fun to knit.
I need company.
Well, that's really good to know that you guys want to do that. That'd be. That's a possibility.
I learned how to do color work, but it hurts my hands, unfortunately. I never thought I would say that. But arthritis got me.
He's a bad person.
Yes.
I'm not terribly fond of color work, but I have found that doing it Portuguese with from both sides is really for me the easiest way to do it. And it's such a different style of knitting in terms of what muscles you use,
Yeah, I've read that.
that if you really, really, really want to do color work, it might be worth giving a try.
Well, I have to admit that the first year I really got back into knitting and crocheting, I had to wear the compression gloves. My hands were killing me. But the more I did it, actually,
Yeah.
things the better I've gotten for it.
Well, I know from teaching people to knit that's really very common, that at first everyone grips their needles really tightly and knits on the tips of the needles, which makes it harder to push the stitches around. And after a while, when you start having some flow, it does relax because you're just handling everything more lightly.
Well, there seems to be a big difference between crocheting and knitting too, in terms of comfort level for the arthritically inclined. I know my mother had to give up one of them, and I do not remember which. Or she got so bad. But luckily I can still do both.
Well, I can do both, but I have to pace myself. So I can do a pair of socks like every 6 weeks, but I have in between, I have to do something on bigger needles.
And that's a good habit anyway, to keep, if you're a person who works on 2 or 3 things kind of rotating, it's a good idea to have them in different weights, because it is better exercise for your hands.
Yeah.
That sounds great. I hadn't thought of that. I just have too many whips out.
I pretty much finish something before I start something else, because otherwise it becomes chaotic.
Yes.
And I discovered that I love to block stuff. When I first started knitting things, oh my gosh, I hated to block anything. I wouldn't do it. But now I get towards the end of something and I start thinking about blocking it, because it looks so beautiful, especially when you do lace. It becomes this beautiful, gorgeous thing that I made.
Yes.
And I've been wondering, I do have a question. I think you said this is going to be 50 inches on a side.
Mm-hmm.
I think I need some more blocking pads.
Approximately.
I don't know that I have something that can be 50 inch. I don't think I have enough squares to make 50 inches on a side. I'll have to put them together and check.
I mean, I don't know what your situation is. I usually, I throw down a sheet on top of a rug and then I can pin into that. So like on top of a carpet.
I'd have to keep Milo out,
Yeah,
and I guess I could do that.
When I have to block something on the floor, I put another sheet over top of it to keep the cats from sleeping on it.
yeah, that's a good idea.
The cats always have to inspect the knitting.
Yeah.
Those
Oh,
are
yeah.
big.
And they like the smell of it, so.
They love to lie on it. That's the final inspection process.
It's like Jack Russell Terriers inspect, and it has to smell like both of us. But when it comes to the big projects, I'm afraid I just take it to my local yarn shop because we live in a very small condo and I do not have enough space. And if I put it on the floor, Lewis will pick it up from the floor. So it's not happening.
Two of our dogs will run into a room where there's blocking happening and skid to a stop when they see that there are tools in the way. You know, they'll just like, you know, anything foreign, like a foreign material like that, just, and they'll just go around it. But Cardigan will just walk right over it, which I think is really funny. And you know, I just let her.
I'm just finishing up Clue 2 and I won at Yarn Chicken. Which
Good for
makes me
you.
very happy.
Lucky you, I missed by 1 row.
Oh, no.
Oh,
Oh no, that meant I got to buy another skein of that wonderful Jacob yarn and like I can't wait to make a hat or something out of it. It was a good excuse.
I had to do 2 swatches. I undid both of my swatches. And I have, I think, 2 or 3 rows of my second swatch still intact, but that's about it.
Well, I messed up on the needle size like somebody else did, so that's my excuse and I'm sticking to it.
I was very careful with changing the needle size. I got down to the end of Clue 2 and I was going to go to bed. And before I went to bed, I changed the needles.
Oh, smart lady.
Well, I'm experienced at these things. You see.
I was gonna say, she knows herself all too well, right?
Yes, yes. And I knew I would forget, so I changed them.
Dee, I did something similar. I did go to bed, but when I put the yarn down, when I put the project down, I took the second set of needles, smacked on the top of it. So I would see them as soon as I picked it up in the morning.
Yeah, well, that's a good idea too.
I would have done the same thing.
When I had to take out my swatch so that I could use the A yarn, I decided to just put it in some water because it was so crimped. And usually the yarn just kind of goes right back almost to a straight piece. But this, it loosened up some, but it was still crimped. And I wondered, is that a sign that a garment will hold its shape better?
Probably, yeah. Did you use hot water?
No. Well,
That
no.
probably would, yeah. Some of the, because I always recommend using hot water to wash the natural yarns because they don't go through a second bath, like a dye bath. They're not as they're likely to still have some spinning oil and kind of dust from the mill in them, and they really do bloom so nicely in warm water. So you shouldn't be afraid to use warm and even very hot water, like as I usually use water as hot as I can get it from the tap. Because it's never going to be even close to the temperature at which they scour the wool. So you're pretty safe. And that'll lift off any oils or dust and dirt and really clean it. So, and also encourage the bloom, because this yarn's going to bloom more than you might be used to as well. So that could be what's at play there, is that if you just put it in cold water, it might not dissolve the oil, and the oil will help it take its shape too.
I call that the hot tub treatment. What happens when you get into a hot tub? You relax. So does your yarn.
And I have a question. The Shetland wool, I love it, but I must be allergic to some of the chaff that's still in it, because I had to turn the fan on that blew in my face, because otherwise I was having a bit of trouble breathing. So,
oh, that's interesting.
Well, that's me. I have a lot of allergies. Did you have a problem washing that particular one, the Shetland? You mentioned that you had to wash the Jacob twice. And I wondered about washing the Shetland, although they're all going to be in the same.
Yeah, I didn't, yeah, in my swatches had all the yarns, so I can't tell you.
Okay.
I'm just trying to think of like times that I've washed the I've used the Shetland by itself, and I can't remember if the water was really dirty or not.
Well, when I started using that one, a lot of little pieces of chaff came out on my shirt, you know, and I figured that was the problem. So all I have to do is make sure that I wash the piece well enough so that I get rid of as much as I can. I haven't had a problem with anything else, just that one.
That's interesting. It does shed a little bit. I think what we're seeing in that shedding is just a little bit of coarser hair and kemp maybe that's in the fiber. It's not, I hadn't come across a large amount of vegetable matter in that yarn, but it
might have been kemp.
Yeah, but it does come from the same mill, so it's likely that whatever washing strategy they're using isn't taking out as much as, you know, from some other mills. So, you know, the mills are all working to reduce the amount of energy that they spend on things like washing, and also the amount of soaps and things like that they use and are pouring into wastewater in an effort to be able to recycle water and to use as little of it as possible. So that doesn't bother me. I know I'm going to wash my final garment anyway. So the fact that it's not quite as clean as it could be when it comes to me, that doesn't bother me. But it could be what's at play there is, you know, that they're, whatever process they're using or whatever products they're using isn't taking everything out of it.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
You know,
if you'd have
not that they would ever put you in danger of catching anthrax or something like that from it, just that they're not you know, they're not doing a deep clean on it because they know we're going to clean it at some point.
Okay. Well, it's beautiful. And it knitted up. It's just lovely. I mean,
yeah. And sometimes the propensity of some of these fibers to bloom, even as you're working with them, makes them kind of sticky, you know, can make them more difficult to rip out and everything. Sometimes that layer of oil and a slight amount of grime will keep the yarn smooth as long as you're working on it. And then when you wash it, then it lets go of all that and blooms. So it can be beneficial as well.
So when I undid my swatches, I just knit this crimped yarn. Am I gonna be disappointed?
I don't think so. I think you'll be fine.
I hope so. Didn't even think of doing that.
I think
I
Julie
did
said
the same thing, Sheila. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just knit right from my swatch.
Oh,
It
good.
looks fine. I mean, I couldn't tell you where on the garment it even is now. I mean, I think I know it's the last couple rows of the second clue.
Yeah,
but
that's exactly the way it is for me.
it
So,
doesn't show
yeah.
anything.
Well, it doesn't show right now, but I had this image that, oh, when I wash it, the stitches are gonna be bigger or smaller. But yarn is so forgiving. It will be okay.
Especially wool.
Yeah.
Wool, I mean, it's terribly forgiving as far as I don't knit with hardly anything other than wool.
Could we talk some more about using the hot water to wash the wool? You know, I kind of always thought I had to use cold water, and I don't understand why it doesn't shrink when you use the hot water.
Well, for one thing, wool doesn't shrink. What happens with wool is that when you wash it in hot water and you agitate and rub it at the same time, and or shock it by abruptly changing the temperature from hot to cold, then it will full, which is the process by which the scales along the cuticle open up and the wool curls, the fibers curl around each other, around and around and around, and they catch on each other. And it's not shrinking, it's just binding the fibers closer together. So wool doesn't shrink, it just fulls. That's a process called fulling or felting. And that's where the fibers basically, curl up around each other and become tighter and tighter. So instead of this, you've got this, okay? So wool can tolerate hot water. In fact, when fleeces go to the mill, in order to get all the nasty bacterial dirt off of it, it must be scoured, which is washing almost to the boiling point. So I think you're washing at a temperature of upwards of 180 degrees or something like that. So water from your tap is going to be about 120 degrees. It's never going to be as close in temperature to the scouring temperature. So you can wash natural wools in hot water. You want to fill a basin with water as hot as you can get it from the tap and soap, and just let your wools sink into that water and sit there until the water is cool. You can squish the suds through the fabric like once, but you should never swish it at any length or rub the fabric or anything like that. And then just let it sit until the water cools. And if you do that, it will clean it. You'll see that the water is brown or, kind of oily colored, and lift it out and then rinse it. You want to rinse the fabric in the same temperature the water was when you took it out. So when you lift your sweater out of the water, just, take note of how cool it is and run a rinsing bath at the same temperature. Now, some fibers are so sturdy that you can even shock them into blooming a bit by plunging them in hot water and then cold water and then hot water and then cold water, and they still won't felt because they're sturdy enough and resist felting. Long wools are a good example of that. So that's the answer. Now, whenever something is dyed, you should never just plunge it into hot water, because dyed yarn is a totally different animal. Dye is susceptible to running in hot water. Not all dye will run in hot water, but you never know until you try it. So again, that's a really good reason to have a swatch so you can test. In fact, even with the natural wools, you can always test your laundering technique or your laundering process with your swatch. That's like a fantastic reason to keep it and play with it. So some dyed yarns will start letting go of their color after 20 minutes, and some can tolerate a hot bath and not let go of their color. It depends on the dye process, the fiber itself, how, you know, how the dye takes. So there are lots of there are a lot more factors at play there. But with natural fibers, you're pretty safe in washing them in hot water. Again, test with your swatch. You know, don't throw your sweater into hot water and swish it around and say, Ann Hansen said I can do this. You know, you gotta be sensible and test.
So, and I have a question.
Actually, Donna had her hand up. So Donna.
Oh, sorry. I'll do that.
I'm finishing up clue 2 because I'm behind. And when I am done with clue 2, am I finished with using color A?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, you're pretty much using up color A in the first 2 clues.
Okay. All right. That was my question. Thanks.
Lindy?
Yeah, I have a package of color safe. They look like dryer pads, but they're not. And I was reading years ago that this would keep the colors from leaking or fading or running when you wash your sweater. But do you have any knowledge of what those do and how they work?
It doesn't prevent the yarn from leak or the color from leaking. It prevents it from being retaken up in a different part of the fabric. So they're called color catchers. Yeah. And if you put it in the wash, it'll absorb color that leaks from your fabric. So if you're washing something red, the sheet will look pink at the end, but it doesn't prevent color from running. So you can still lose color from your yarn when you use that. But if you're doing Fair Isle, for instance, it should prevent the colors from staining each other. That said, I don't know. I don't know if it's perfect. I don't know if they work perfectly or not. Like if you do a red design on a white fabric, I don't know if you're going to get no staining by using a color catcher. And the reason I don't know that is because I don't use very much dyed yarn anymore. I can't even remember the last time. Well, the last time I knit with something dyed was Mother's Day, but it's very rare that I knit with colored yarn.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have there ever been any issues with the red from the Festivus? Because a lot of those are kind of Fair Isle or color work patterns.
Yeah.
I think I did a red and white one. I didn't have any trouble with it bleeding into the white.
Yeah, I mean, different years have been different, I think. Last year, one of the colors ran for me and one of them didn't, but I wasn't doing color work. I'm just saying, but the year before when I did the color work stocking, that yarn didn't run, you know. Again, the fiber content matters too. Like some fibers grab onto dye and hold it really well and others don't. And we're not doing the dyeing here, so we don't have any control over what the process is either. You know, you just sort of hope that the dyer understands that with the range of colors, that we do, and the fact that they might be mixed, you definitely don't want bleeding. And whatever they can do to offset that, please do. You know.
I sometimes get Miss Bab's yarn and have done a couple of color work, not Fair Isle projects with it. And various of the darker colors bleed more than the lighter colors. And what she reported from her dyeing process, and she has a long discussion of it on the website, is that the pH of your water affects whether or not the dyes will run. And that they test for color fastness. I think she's in Tennessee with their water, but that is no guarantee that when it arrives at your house and you use your water, that it won't run and bleed. And she recommends that you actually wash the yarn in hanks before balling and watch what happens with the color.
We have also found that the unicorn fiber rinse that we sell, it's like a conditioner, that can help defray some of the bleeding or the color loss that you get with some of the yarns. Like back in the early 2000s, when knitting kind of exploded and hand dyeing definitely exploded, there was a lot of variation between dyers and, you know, the quality of their process and the quality of the dyes and whatnot. And some dyers were known for colors that ran and others weren't. But I know one dyer that I worked with, I just mentioned to her that about the unicorn fiber wash, and she actually started using it, you know, on her yarns as a final step, so that it did, she felt that it really did help. And that might be what you're saying, that it does correct the pH of the water by adding that. Of course, that's something you're adding to the water. It is a chemical that you're putting on the wool, but it is formulated for wool, so it's supposed to be gentle. I don't use it very much, but when something is when I've knit with something, you know, kind of rustic and sturdy, and I'm maybe going to give it to my mom or something, I often will use that as a final step, just to make sure the fabric is soft when it goes to the recipient.
When you use that, do you let it soak in that, or do you just dip it in and take it
No,
out?
it's a rinse. So what I usually do is I wash my woolens and rinse them until the water runs clear, and then I run a final rinse bath, and I put the conditioner in it, and it says on the label 5 minutes, you know, leave it for 5 or 15 minutes, but you can leave it as long as you want, as long as the wool is undyed. And I usually do, like, I don't really have a strict timing. I walk away from my stuff and I might be gone for half a day or an hour or 2 days, you know, so it just depends. Anything can happen. So however long it is, I leave it.
But as a chemist, it makes perfect sense to me because when you think of hydrangeas, you can have pink or blue. It depends on the pH of your soil.
Correct, yeah.
Some of these color additives or, things that keep it from color running could be buffers that help keep it at a certain pH and it keeps it on the blue side, shall we say. So yeah, that all makes perfect sense to me.
I have a shawl that the colors did run. Is there anything that I can do to kind of make some of that go away?
How long ago did that happen?
It was probably about 2 months ago.
Yeah, it might be too late, but Sherry had a problem with something and we were kind of going back and forth about it. She found that alcohol was the most effective. Isn't that right, Sherry? Are you still here?
The unicorn power scour helped a little bit, but this was something I was trying to correct right after it happened.
It was still wet. It was still wet. Yeah.
The power scour helped a tiny bit, but the thing that helped the most was blotting the spots with rubbing alcohol. So I cannot confirm nor deny. I don't know what yarn you used, but that is something that helped my particular project, which was a white sweater with a red stripe.
Oh boy, I'm glad it worked. Well, mine is multicolor and they just kind of bled together. It still looks okay, but it's not as bright as it was.
The
So I
product, product we were talking about is called oh, it just fled my brain.
Is it a unicorn as well?
No, the cheats, the color catchers are from Johnson & Johnson. Oh, Shout, right.
Shout makes mine. I don't know if there's other brands.
If you can go on Amazon and type in color catchers or color catcher sheets or something like that, and they'll come up right up on Amazon. You can't always find them in the grocery store, but technically you should be able to, but you just won't always see them there.
Yeah, I heard about those and I did look, well, just at one store, but I will go on Amazon and see if I can find that and give it a try. Because, well, it's still a nice shawl, but it's not as beautiful as it was.
The color catcher probably won't work on your shawl. Shout. Okay, yeah. But the blotting.
Here they are. Here's the color catchers.
Yeah.
In a little box, and it's just a sheet. Looks like a dryer sheet.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you.
And like when I'm doing color work stuff, when I'm washing it, I throw it in the basin. Like I use them in the washing machine too, but if I'm doing a color work thing, I put it in to catch any dyes that might run so they don't, like she said, contaminate the other colors.
Like if you have a new pair of jeans and you're washing it with other stuff, you want to throw that in. It's definitely worth having that on your laundry shelf, just in case.
Well, I've learned so many things tonight. This is great.
We're here for you.
What was the wool wash that Julie F was talking about that she bought? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Julie, are you here?
I don't know if she's on.
Is Julie
she's on tonight?
Yeah, I'm here. It was Marie Green makes it.
Marie Green. Okay.
Yeah, I've got some literally right here. I think she only sells it now through Not Another Hat in Oregon. Yeah, and it's just rinse-free fiber wash called Bath. But yeah, I was gonna try the unicorn stuff too, the rinse that you were talking about, Anne.
It's kind of nice to have, like I said, I don't use it very often, but sometimes I do. Sometimes I just like to test and see, oh, will this matter? You know,
Hey Sherry, when you were talking earlier, I noticed there was a nice blanket behind you and I was wondering if you made that.
No, I leave it out here because I'm supposed to be finishing it. I bought it at an auction and it made me sad. I bought it at an estate sale because it's unfinished and all the materials were in the box. And I thought it was so sad that it had just been given away.
oh,
But it is made out of like 8-sided flowered squares on size 0 needles with cotton thread.
Oh, my.
Oh my gosh.
So
I have a needlepoint.
yeah, I think it looks mighty fine just as it is.
Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful.
I have a
My
needlepoint that I found at Goodwill, and it's a pretty large one, and it's extremely pretty. But I'm like, no member of the family could take this, and I felt so, I got it for $7. It was just,
It breaks my heart. We have
yes,
to
it
have
does.
these.
Yes, it does.
So I figure I'm loving it as it is. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter if I finish it ever.
Mhm.
So,
It looks
There we go.
finished to us.
right? It's all
Yeah.
you need to, it's all you need to see. It's from a pattern book from, that was published in 1935.
Oh
Oh
my
my.
gosh.
I think those are called counterpanes.
Yeah, it was a bedspread.
Yeah, counterpane.
Yeah.
Nice.
my grandmother used to make bedspreads like that. She had a few of those tablecloths and bedspreads, huge ones.
Yeah.
I always went there was a period here in St. Paul when obviously people's mothers were dying in the old house. And I'd go to garage sales, and the thing I'd find in great abundance were hand embroidered cross-stitched tablecloths,
Mhm.
which I have one of from my grandmother. And people were, like you said, people were selling them for all complete sets, a big tablecloth and 12 napkins, all hand embroidered for like $25. And I would just buy them because I couldn't bear the thought that they were unappreciated. But I fortunately have a daughter-in-law who loves all that stuff. So I put them in the attic and they're always a Christmas present.
There's a mansion here in Akron that was owned by the Cyberling family that founded Goodyear Tire, called Stan Hewitt Hall. And they actually have a needlework guild that their main mission is to maintain and restore all the historic needlework that was in the mansion. So they have people that embroider and do cross stitch and all kinds of fancy needlepoint, but they have a big sale every year, and it's a big arts and crafts fair called Ohio Mart. But the guild always puts on this little sale at the mansion, apart from the big Ohio Mart, which is curated vendors. And you can go in there and you can find like these people have donated all their undone or half done projects. And I've bought quite a few things there over the years. Sometimes they're kits that haven't even been started. Sometimes they're started. You can find every kind of floss and all kinds of old pamphlets of, patterns. And I bought a couple years ago, I bought a big needle point. It's Monet's water lilies with the it's huge. And the person had started it and done just like one little corner. And it has the pattern and it has all the yarn and everything. Now, how much progress have I made on it? But no. It's not going, yeah, it's not going back to their sale. They also do a big show every year, and they, give awards and stuff, but they don't take knitting and they don't take crochet. They only do, I don't know how you distinguish needlecraft from like knitting, what the term would be, but they only do things that are stitched on fabric, I guess is the designation. There's beadwork, I mean, it's beautiful. I go to the show every year and look at who won the prizes, and it can be a published pattern. It can be from a kit even. It doesn't have to be an original design or anything, but they're just beautiful, beautiful, crewel and just all kinds of needlework.
Julie, my mother belonged to that guild. She would travel up to Akron for meetings once a month. And she was, they were doing restoration of kneelers, I think, like in the they were doing, and when she was in it, they were all doing restoration of the kneelers.
Yeah. Yeah, there's beautiful stuff that they do. I've never joined it, but I really live literally 5 minutes. It's around the corner and up the hill from there. But I really enjoy this sale and seeing all these old things that, like precious moments patterns and, all this stuff from the 80s and the 70s that was popular then. And it's a lot of fun to go through and just look at all the patterns and the kits and things that people started and never finished and turned around and gave it away.
And this is why I'm trying to get rid of my stash. Not getting rid of it, but I am knitting it up because I have probably half a needlepoint shop in my basement from my mother because I just could not part with everything. I have literally hundreds of books. I probably have 200 needlepoint or books related to needlepoint, and not just instructional and pattern books, but the history of needlepoint and the history, because my mother was an academic and she always wanted to know the why. And she just has all these, oh my God, all these books. And so I might donate them. That's a good idea. I never even thought of it, to donate to their sale.
Or to the guild. That might be stuff that they, maybe she used it in her work there, and
especially since she had a history with them.
Right. I never even, until you said something, because I'm to the point where, I can now part with things without being an emotional wreck. And I need to get this stuff out. I mean, my whole basement is my mother's house.
Yeah.
And I'm working on getting it out.
And people within the guild itself, the members might be interested in that stuff, not to put in the sale, but for their personal libraries. And things like that
well,
too.
I've got a floor loom. It's not a loom, a floor stand that has a rug that's probably an 8th finish, and it's either Erica Williams or Elsa Williams. I can't remember the name of the designer, but she was a very well-known needlepoint designer. And I have that Mom started, and all the, they used to call, I don't know what they call it now, but it was Persian wool. That's what they used to do the needlepoint. And I don't know how many hand painted canvases that she was going to needlepoint. And it's just like, this stuff has got to go, because my kids will give it to Goodwill. They won't know what to do with it. It's going to Goodwill. I know this. So
that would be a great place to give it, because they would know, or they would know people that would want it.
Right. Well, you might see me. We might have to meet for lunch up there one day.
Yeah, that'd be great. It's always the first weekend in October.
Okay, I'm going to be gone then.
Yeah, I'll be gone then too. I have to take my mom somewhere. So, but that's not the only time I'm sure you could donate stuff to them.
Right. So that's a real thought. Okay.
Yeah, anytime.
My son-in-law's mother died from COVID in 2020, and to say she was an avid knitter is a gross understatement. And so I knew she told Whitney she couldn't marry Tom if she had learned to knit, but Whitney was not doing any knitting. And his sister, Mariana, also knows how to knit, but she was just getting started in her academic career, and she might even have been in her postdoc at that time. So she didn't have time. So I volunteered to finish anything Ann had on the needles. And Mariana said, no, this is what's going to make me start knitting again, which was fine. But I was more than willing to pick up her projects and finish them. She was pretty much a sweater knitter. She never did much of anything else.
One of the women in my knitting group had a great aunt that passed away, and she had a half finished blanket that she was making, and I don't even know if it was half finished, but her daughter asked my friend if she could finish it, and my friend was like, oh my God, it was acrylic yarn, and it's, which is not fun to knit with. And I said, we were all together and there was like 9 or 10 of us. I said, why don't we each take it? Your cousin will never know, and we'll each knit a section. We'll each do like 40 rows or something of it. And so that's what we did. We passed it around and we finished it for my friend Laura. And so she gave it back to her cousin, and her cousin was just thrilled. So all's well that ends well. I'm gonna have to go, guys. I'm gonna miss Saturday. I'm gonna be on Pelee Island up in Lake Erie, and at
sad.
a mini
Sad.
mini knitting retreat, and with some friends in a cabin on the beach. Wish you all could be there. So
Sounds wonderful.
I'm really looking forward to it. I'm so exhausted after this past weekend. I had my sister-in-law was here from out of state, and we were on the go the whole weekend, and I am just ready to pass out. So, and I had to work today, but you guys have, I know, I had one question, Ann. If we're finishing clue 3, I'm finished with clue 3. Can we finish the center of the shawl? Can we take the stitches?
Yeah,
off?
you can do that anytime.
Okay, all righty.
Yeah.
And then
Anytime. It.
at the end of clue 3, we don't cut the yarn, we leave the yarn connected? Or can
Whatever
we?
it says, I don't have the pattern in front of me, but whatever it says.
I don't think it says anything unless I read past it, which, I'm prone to do, but I'll check it
Elizabeth,
again.
if you did it wrong, I did it the same way. I
Okay.
read it as to leave it attached, so better
Okay.
safe than sorry.
Yeah, I'm leaving it attached. I'll wait and see. So you never know. It's not a big deal. I just was kind of like, jumping the gun. And everybody, I got my barn box yarn today and I love it. Nobody else is going to like it. So I'll send you guys shipping labels, and don't open the package. Just put my shipping label on it. I'll send prepaid postage and you can just mail it to
Nice
me.
try.
Yeah.
This will be my first barn box. I really looking
You'll
forward.
love it. You'll love it. I can't wait for the patterns to come out. So I gotta go. I'll see everybody later.
Bye.
Bye.
Elizabeth.
See ya.
Coughing too much. I'm going to say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, Lindy.
See ya.
Yeah, we're really excited about Barn Box this month.
Trisha just asked a question. Is it too late to join Barn Box for July?
If you join now, just shoot an email to David to see if you can get this month's. I think his cutoff is like the 5th. So if you join
That's today.
if you join right this minute, it should be fine. But just to be sure, send an email to david@knitspot.com and ask if you can please get in on this month's. It should be possible, especially if you're domestic. And just ask if you can. Hi, Carrie.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Oh, doing okay. Yeah. Had a couple busy weeks, so
Yeah.
I am up to date with my shawl.
Awesome.
I wanted to say
I don't mean to underestimate people, but I am pleasantly gratified that people are able to keep up. I was worried that the clues would be too much to knit each week, but it sounds like it's very doable. Like people are keeping up pretty well. So
I'm glad to have a break, though. I was able to finish before today, and then I could work on my art.
Yeah. Nice.
And I wanted to say, well, I don't know, there's not very many people left, but I did run out of yarn A.
Me
with
too.
one row left. And I spliced in a little piece of that parfait yarn
That's
from
what I did.
previous barn box, and it's perfect.
You cannot even tell.
Cannot even tell. Yeah.
And Cynthia did the same thing.
Oh, good. Okay. I'm
Yeah.
not the only one.
It's not the right weight, clearly, but for just a
can't really tell.
tiny amount,
Yeah.
the color matches perfectly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did this. Yeah.
I
That was-
actually undid the
Oh,
plies
you
a
are
little
here.
bit. Yeah,
Me too.
Did. I thought about doing that, and I was like,
I took out some of the white and some of the dark, depending, I varied it. So it, if you're really looking for it, you can see the difference, but
Yeah, but you had a bigger
It's okay.
stripe, right? I just had one row.
I had
me too.
2.5 rows. Well,
Oh,
I had one ridge that I was missing.
Yeah, I had literally one row. So I figured
Yeah,
it
me
wouldn't
too.
matter.
Yeah.
Nobody would
I
know.
mean, I wasn't gonna get a whole skein of, plus I didn't want to wait. I just wanted to get on to the next clue.
I wanted to see what was coming next.
Yes,
Right.
me too.
So I can be happy with it.
So if anybody wants this amount,
there we go.
Because that's all that's left. It's great yarn.
Yeah, I love the yarn.
Send me a chat message and I can put it in the mail to somebody, but it's still gonna be
you guys are
crimpy.
scaring me because I made, so my prototype, I did run out of color A on my prototype by like 4 rows, I think. So to compensate, I took 30 rows out of the first 2 clues just to make sure everybody
I don't
could.
know. I ran out.
Well,
No, I
you know
know.
what?
And I just think some knitters, it always amazes me that people, use yarn so differently. It's just really interesting.
But you said it at one of the barn box chairs. I don't know about Carrie and Cynthia. Well, Cynthia, I do know. I knit continental and I always knit loose. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
am not surprised ever.
I always go down a needle size on your patterns to get
Yeah.
gauge. But
I
This-
remember with other kits, Cynthia has run out of yarn. Like it's kind of
Good
something I
thing.
remember. Yeah.
How we
Yeah, I had
roll,
to go
right,
down 2
Cynthia?
needle sizes.
long shadows. I ran out of yarn on long shadows. But that's the only one.
I ended up with this much left.
See, from one extreme
Yeah.
to the other.
So I was just like thrilled I had some left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for you.
So if anybody needs any, just let me know.
It's just interesting. I mean, as long as there are knitters, there's going to be variations, and that's what's kind of nice too. So
Well, I'm gonna get going.
yeah, me
Have
too.
a great
There we
night.
go.
Oh, looks like it's nighttime. All right.
Time for
Bye.
supper.
Bye,
Bye,
guys.
Bye, everybody. See you Saturday.
Yep.